Welcome. It's great to be able to celebrate Christmas Eve with you in this way together. If you're here in the Kingston area, you recognize how the winter storm has adjusted our plans, and so we're here in this modified setting to be able to experience Christmas Eve together. And again, I want to thank you for being here in this setting. And so as we celebrate, we're going to take some time to have a story, and then we're also going to share a few thoughts on the mission of Jesus at Christmas. And so let's get started.
Well, we are going to read the story of The Crippled Lamb by Max Lucado. Once upon a time in a sunny valley, there lived a little lamb named Joshua. He was white with black spots, black feet, and sad eyes. Josh felt sad when he saw the other lambs with snow-white wool and no spots. He felt sad when he saw the other sheep with their moms and dads because he didn't have a mom or a dad. But he felt saddest when he saw the other lambs running and jumping because he couldn't. Josh had been born with one leg that didn't work right. He was crippled. He always limped when he walked. That's why he always watched while the other lambs ran and played. Josh felt sad and alone, except when Abigail was around. Abigail was Josh's best friend. She didn't look like a friend for a lamb. She was an old cow. She was brown with white blotches that looked like rain puddles on a path. Her belly was as round as a barrel, and her voice was always kind and friendly. Some of Josh's favorite hours were spent with Abigail. They loved to pretend they were on adventures in distant lands. Josh liked to listen to Abigail tell stories about the stars. They would spend hours on the hill, looking into the valley. They were good friends. But even with a friend like Abigail, Josh still got sad. It made him sad to be the only lamb who could not run and jump and play in the grass. That's when Abigail would turn to him and say, "Don't be sad, little Joshua. God has a special place for those who feel left out." Josh wanted to believe her, but it was hard. Some days he just felt alone. He really felt alone the day the shepherds decided to take the lambs to the next valley where there was more grass. The sheep had been in this valley so long the grass was nearly bare. All the sheep were excited when the shepherd told them they were going to a new meadow. As they prepared to leave, Josh hobbled over and took his place on the edge of the group. But the others started laughing at him. "You're too slow to go all the way to the next valley. Go back, Slowpoke. We'll never get there if we wait on you. Go back, Joshua." That's when Josh looked up and he saw the shepherd standing in front of him. "They are right, my little Joshua. You better go back. This trip is too long for you. Go and spend the night in the stable." Josh looked at the man for a long time, and then he turned slowly and began limping away. When Josh got to the top of the hill, he looked down and saw all the other sheep headed toward the green grass. Never before had he felt so left out. A big tear slipped out of his eye, rolled down his nose, and fell on a rock. Just then he heard Abigail behind him, and Abigail said what she always said when Josh felt sad. "Don't be sad, little Joshua. God has a special place for those who feel left out." Slowly, the two friends turned and walked to the stable together. By the time they got to the little barn, the sun was setting like a big orange ball. Josh and Abigail went inside and began to eat some hay out of the feed box. They were very hungry, and the hay tasted so good. For a little while, Joshua forgot that he had been left behind. "Now go to sleep, little friend," Abigail said after they finished eating. "You've had a hard day." Josh was tired, so he lay down on the corner on some straw and he closed his eyes. He felt Abigail lie down beside him, and he was glad to have Abigail as a friend. Soon, Josh was asleep. At first, he slept soundly, curled up against Abigail's back. In his sleep, he dreamed. He dreamed of running and jumping just like the other sheep, and he dreamed of long walks with Abigail through the valley. He dreamed of being in a place where he never felt left out. Suddenly, strange noises woke him up. "Abigail," he whispered, "wake up. I'm scared." Abigail lifted her big head and looked around. The stable was dark, except for a small lamp hanging on the wall. "Somebody is in here," Josh whispered. They looked across the dimly lighted stable. There, lying on some fresh hay in the feed box, was a baby. A young woman was resting on a big pile of hay beside the feed box. Josh looked at Abigail, thinking his friend could tell him what was going on. But Abigail was just as surprised as Josh was. Josh looked again at the woman and the child. They limped across the stable. He stopped next to the mother and looked into the baby's face. The baby was crying. He was cold. The woman picked up the baby and put him on the hay next to her. Josh looked around the stable for something to keep the baby warm. Usually there were blankets, but not tonight. The shepherds had taken them on their trip across the valley. Then Josh remembered his own soft, warm wool. Timidly, he walked over and curled up close to the baby. "Well, thank you, little lamb," the baby's mother said softly. And soon the little child stopped crying and he went back to sleep. About that time, a man entered the stable carrying some rags. "I'm so sorry, Mary," he explained. "This is all the cover I could find." "Well, it's okay," she answered. "This little lamb has kept the new king warm." "A king?" Joshua looked at the baby and he wondered who he might be. "His name is Jesus." Mary spoke as if she knew Josh's question. "He's God's son. He came from heaven to teach us about God." Just then, there was another noise at the door. It was the shepherds, the ones who had left Joshua behind. Their eyes were big and they were excited. "We saw a bright light and heard the angels," they began. And then they saw Joshua next to the baby. "Joshua, do you know who this baby is?" He does now. It was the young mother who was speaking. She looked at Joshua and she smiled. "God has heard your prayers, little lamb. This little baby is the answer." Joshua looked down at the baby. Somehow he knew this was a special child, and this was a special moment. He also understood why he had been born with a crippled leg. Had he been like the other sheep, he would have been in the valley. But since he was different, he was in the stable, among the first to welcome Jesus into the world. Joshua turned and walked back to Abigail and took his place beside his friend. "You were right," he told her. "God does have a special place for me." I'm not sure if there was a little crippled lamb laying beside the manger. But the one thing I am sure is that God has a special place for you and for me. And He loves you very, very much. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thanks, Val. This is an important set of days. The 24th and the 25th of December, whenever you think about them, there's significant moments that are a part of this time. There may be some other dates in your life that are significant for our family. September 17th is one of those very important days. It's memorialized on our calendar. It's often observed as a time of celebration because it's the day that I asked my wife out on our first date. It was a trip to a concert that was a little bit further away from where we were going to school together. We asked a couple other people to go with us, and so there were 4 of us on the trip, and all the drive down, I had wanted her to sit in the front seat, but she ended up in the back and she fell asleep, and I was talking with another friend of mine on the journey. We sat together at the concert, and on the drive back, I started to get up the courage to actually have the deep conversation. And when I think about it now, it was actually kind of intense. But in my moment, as I'm getting ready to reveal my heart, I'm gripping the wheel very tightly, and she's in the passenger seat. We've been talking. We've been spending some time together over the last number of weeks. And I am looking straight ahead because I wasn't sure that I had the confidence to look at her. And I said, "Well," and then there was a long pause. And I did that several times. I think maybe even 5 times, in fact. I started in and said, "Well," and then there was this long pause. And finally, I acknowledged, I've said that a few times. And then I went forward and bared my heart and unloaded how I felt and how I was looking for a relationship with her that would really grow and have an opportunity to mature. And in the middle of all of this, I kind of stopped and then looked at her, and as I looked, I realized she did one of these. And I'm thinking, oh no, I've crashed and burned here. She followed it up by saying, "Well, the feeling is mutual." And I'm like, the feeling's mutual. That's good. That's really good. I didn't crash and burn. And our relationship grew from there. That date is a significant event. And it's not just a good story in our lives. It's had a significant ripple effect, not only for us as individuals, but for people we haven't met yet, and people that are part of our circle, our children, our family members, so many others. So we celebrate that anniversary as the beginning point of our connection together. Now, all of us have some of these kind of pivotal moments in life where we look back on them and realize how life has really kind of taken a turn, or maybe even pressed a reset button in the middle of it. We may have changed jobs, we may have relocated, we may have had the arrival of children, or it may have been a tragic event where we've lost a loved one. But those pivotal events that have been moments in our lives, as important as they are, I can't imagine what it would have been like and how mind-bending it would have been for what happened to the shepherds that night. You're familiar with the story, seeing an angel and then a whole bunch of angels. And We see them as insiders on the whole Christmas story, but they were definitely outsiders from where they were that night. Stinky, shepherds were kind of mistrusted. They lived isolated lives. The other shepherds were mostly their only family. In their day, they would have been some of the last people you'd ever expect to hear this news. As a matter of fact, they would have been way, way down on the list of people that you would have invited to be able to share this news with. But they turn out to be the first. The angel appears in the sky, the whole bunch of angels, and there they are as the first visitors at the manger. Then there's the wise men. I mean, they're going to follow this star. Now, we don't often think about what they told their families. I mean, could you imagine them walking home and saying, we're about to take a 1,200 plus kilometer journey. It's going to take a couple of years. It's through some hostile lands. We're not sure just exactly what it's going to be like to cross these deserts and through enemy territory, but we're going to go for it. I mean, they would have said, you guys are lunatics. It's a detail that wouldn't be lost on most of the people who were reading this for the first time, but they were far outside the nation of Israel. Technically, for people in Israel, they would have considered them not deserving of this honor to have been aware of Jesus' birth. Their ancestors may have actually been oppressors of the nation of Israel during their years of exile in Babylon. But they're invited to meet Jesus, and they take the wild journey to follow through on the invitation given to them in the star. Now, in both cases, we see these folks as the insiders on Christmas. Whenever you lay out a Christmas nativity scene, you always think of the shepherds, the wise men, the animals. They're right in there. Now, here in our church, we have a group of folks who gather together every month at a restaurant to be able to have wings together. And they always are seated in the same building, but different spots in the building. And the invite is open. So on the night we get together, we watch for people that we're expecting or people that we know as they're coming through the door. We either wave, here we are over here, or come on over, or we go and get them so that they can have an opportunity to know where we are together. When I picture what's happening with the shepherds and with the wise men, I picture it a little bit like this. God is saying, I've been waiting for you. Come on over. Let me show you what I'm up to. Let's connect here. Now, somewhere along the way, all people chose to ignore God and to sit someplace else in the restaurant, so to speak. And if they ignore him long enough, well, some people have chosen to realize that they wouldn't want to be bothered with him anymore. They figure they've ignored him so long that he's just irrelevant to them. They've got their own thing going, and maybe they even think he should be ignored. But the birth of Jesus continues a long line of stories of how people far outside the reach of faith, people who wouldn't necessarily have been whom you would have expected, they discover there's an open space at God's table, and he's inviting them to join him. Now, for both the shepherds and the wise men, this was this cut-over moment when they, by their response, became people who were on the outside moving to the inside. God was speaking to them, saying, come and check out what I'm up to. Now, I've talked with a lot of people, and maybe you're watching today, and you're one of them, who've thought, if I showed up at church, well, the place would be struck by lightning. I mean, it would probably even spontaneously burn down. But the invitation to the shepherds and the wise men was not about making them special, but about how God reaches out in every story, reaching out to the least likely to ever think that they should meet with him. Now, God is still inviting us, sharing himself with people. His invitation to check out what he's up to still stands today. It's an invitation to allow our lives that are often kind of segmented into little blocks. Sometimes they maybe even seem fractured and filled with everything that can often be all about us. It's an invitation to the renovation of our hearts. Updates, maybe, as it were, in computer language. The restoration in us that He brings wholeness in us, and a space next to Him for lifelong conversation, becoming His apprentice, allowing Jesus to reorganize our lives around His teaching, and in order to bring wholeness, to bring the best life possible as we trust Him and follow Him, He invites us to His table. Now tonight, if we were all together, we would symbolically light candles and pass the flame. And that's really the reason why we do that, to represent the light of Jesus renovating our lives. A light that changes darkness. A light that brings peace and hope, and love and justice and faith, designed to be the best life possible. Like our friends the shepherds and the wise men, the invitation really carries the most meaning when we respond. So God is inviting you to respond to His invitation. And I'd invite you, if you would like to explore this further, ask questions, or even talk to someone about what it might mean to explore joining Jesus at the table. We would love to have that conversation with you. We would invite you to connect with us online or in person if you're here in the Kingston area. The email address that's on your screen is open to you to ask any questions that you may choose. Tonight, as we are here in this modified setting for Christmas Eve, I want to pray for us, and as we consider Jesus' invitation, we recognize our need of Him. God, tonight we thank You for who You are. We thank You for Your invitation. And we pray that You would help us to engage with You. There are many aspects to who You are that sometimes we've maybe even chosen to sit at another table and to distance ourselves from You. And so God, tonight I pray that Your invitation to people like the shepherds and the wise men would remind us of how You're drawing every single one of us into an opportunity to connect with You in relationship, in friendship, and You long for us to follow You as Your apprentice. And so God, as we think about what that might mean, and as we consider all that is a part of that, I pray that in this Christmas day that we come into in the next few hours, that You would encourage us and that You would remind us of Your gift to us and how it continues to revolutionize who we are. Let this date be a significant date in our journey for some of us who would choose to follow You and engage with You today. In Your name I pray. Amen. Thanks again for taking a few moments to share this time together with us tonight. And as we prepare to go, let me mention that tomorrow on Christmas Day, our service is going to be online. It'll be available starting at 8 a.m. both on Facebook and YouTube. And we look forward to in-person services again on January 1st. And so we wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon in the new year. Have a great night.